This was Winston Churchill's toilet. Why is that top secret? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Sinead with Free Tours by London. I am in a very busy Parliament Square this morning. Today, we're taking a journey through the Cabinet War Rooms of Winston Churchill. And these are the underground bunkers and offices from where Churchill commanded and coordinated the troops from during World War II. Most of the war was directed from the basement of this very building here, the Treasury. We're going to head straight down into the basement because I want to show you where it all took place. In this tiny space, you had 21 windowless rooms to 500 members of staff. We're going to head through the War Council room, the top secret map room, the top secret toilet of Winston Churchill. More on that to come. And if you look here, this is where we're headed underground. This is the main entrance to the Cabinet War Rooms of Winston Churchill. So after you first arrive in, you will collect your tickets and your audio guide. And this is the first thing you are hit with, ladies and gentlemen. This is the global hub of information on the war and the second secret bomb shelter, an easy target that was never hit. Information about this. This bomb suspended here is an original German 250 kilo, 500 pound bomb. Let's just have a look at that again. Isn't that terrifying? So we head straight in here. Now, obviously there's other people here with us, so I'm going to be as discreet as I can. And we immediately get straight into it. And here is the actual Cabinet War Room of Churchill. If you look closely up here on the left-hand side, you will see the clock is frozen in time at 2 minutes to 5, because that was when the very first meeting convened here at exactly 5 o'clock. Those 3 chairs you see in front of Churchill's chair were for the 3 members of the Chiefs of Staff of both the Royal Navy, the Army and the Royal Air Force. This is where all these important meetings took place. Agitated and terrified tensions rose in here. Now, there is 2, it's a bit difficult to see, folks, but above the door, you just about make out that there is 2 lights, a red and a green light. And the green light was meant, above was free of any air raids, but of course red light means there was an air raid taking place above ground. But you can see Churchill getting in the faces of his chiefs of staff here in the front 3 chairs at the time. And Churchill was a big man for maps. As a military man, he had seen 5 conflicts he had been a part of. And a military and a navy man, he was always right in the thick of it. Sometimes it's hard not to believe that he was, if you believe in destiny, the right man in the right job at the right time. And his very first meeting that took place here on the 15th of October, he had said that he would direct the war from this very particular room. And these were all the members of his war cabinet, ladies and gents. Let's have a look through these here. Right in front of us we have Winston Churchill, Sir John Anderson, Clement Attlee, Lord Beaverbrook, Ernest Bevan, Arthur Greenwood, Earl of Halifax, and Sir Kingsley Wood. Oh, this is quite interesting. We'll get into that in a moment, but this is known as the dock, ladies and gents. It's down here where some of the workers who wouldn't be able to get home on the night, when they've been working all through the night, no trains or taxis, and also some of them that would have been too dangerous to go home and too perilous to go home during the raids, would stay down here. And the 500 members of staff that work down here. The steps below on the glass sheet of the floor led to the sub-basement of the dock, as it became known during the war. So shallow down there you couldn't stand up without banging your head off the roof. Rats, insects, and the noise of the air supply system, constant bright lighting, and the lack of flushing toilets made the dock unpopular. But people actually prefer to take their chances of going home during an air raid rather than sleep down here in the dock. Now this is a Royal Marine Guard that is stationed here, and they were responsible for the security of the Cabinet War Rooms and the protection of the members of Parliament and all the staff down here. Down here. This is quite interesting here. This is something I wanted to show you. So this was like a little weather chart. And this would tell the people upstairs how the weather was upstairs because they were so isolated down here. There was also one that said cloudy or windy. And the windy meant there was air raids taking place upstairs. So there was codes everywhere in this area for different conditions upstairs. But look how dark it was, ladies and gentlemen. Can you imagine how chaotic it would have been down here at night time? 24 hours a day, this was manned, 500 people chaotically running around here. The noise of typewriters, constant scrambled phones on the move. I suppose it's best described if you see The Darkest Hour by Gary Oldman. His incredible Oscar-nominated performance, Oscar-winning performance of Churchill, really shows you how effective these war rooms were and how busy they were at the time. This was the private secretary's office of the Prime Minister. Quiet, please. So his private secretary. Must have had a number of them over the course of his time in here. It's incredible to think too when you see these maps that we become so immersed in what happened in Britain and Europe, but it was a global war. And you'll see here Bay of Bengal and the South China Sea. Gonna head down here, an incredible photo of Churchill himself. Let's head through. Churchill Museum is downstairs and we will be heading down there later on. Right now, I'll show you the King, George VI, who was the King at the time. But our next stop is going to be the map room. Now the map room will be coming up at the end of the tour, ladies and gentlemen, but an incredible place. So this is the new section of the Churchill Museum of the Cabinet War Rooms, and it features a lot of artifacts relating to Churchill himself. Also a couple of personal items of his from his lifetime. Look at that amazing image, folks. No flash allowed, I'm afraid, folks, so I'll have to go with what's best from here on in. I've been advised. So this is all part of Churchill's life, because not only was he 2 times Prime Minister, he was also an accomplished author. He published over 40 books in 60 different editions. An incredible amateur painter. Winston Churchill was 65 years old and war was ravaging across Europe. Let's go forward together. So here are some of the more famous images of him. And this is just a little look through some of his personal details and bits about his life. His uniform. Let's have a look here. This is Prime Minister to wear military uniforms while in office. So this is his actual military uniform, folks. How incredible is that? Famous rompers he favoured and wore.
Unlike so many politicians, statesmen, Churchill didn't suffer from any false pomposity. Here he is scrambling up to review American soldiers undergoing physical training. Churchill once fell out of bed and said to his private secretary, "I really look a proper Charlie Chaplin." In the spring of 1944, Churchill went round the country inspecting so many of the men that were going to take part in the invasion of Europe, D-Day. Not only did he inspect British troops, but also those from the United States. Of course, he had a great affinity with the Americans, his mother being American.
And look at some of his hats, ladies and gents. It's going to be impossible to go through all these in detail with so many people around us, but it's actually quite quiet here today. It is quite difficult for me to talk over people, but this is actually one of the most significant things inside here. And that is the flag draped in his coffin during his public state funeral. St. Paul's Cathedral. And here is the video. This film intended, of course, by Her Majesty the Queen, the very first Prime Minister. An incredible life fulfilled. Right, let's move on. Back onto a museum tour, ladies and gents. Look at that. You know, for the variety of hats he wore, to this deliberately control his public image. He's quite handsome, ladies, wasn't he? Terrifying. Amazing insight in the archives here. The Imperial War Museum have done an incredible job down here, folks. Right, gonna find out where to go next. So this is the room of the Prime Minister's typos. Above us is the slab of the reinforced steel, you guys. It was installed between 1940 and 1943 and was designed to protect the site from the direct hit of one of those bombs I showed you at the very beginning. So down here were basically the narrower corridors with the accommodations of the members of staff of Churchill himself, including his secretaries. This is the sleeping quarters of the Prime Minister's detectives, ladies and gents. A little office there for them as well. Everyone slept in these little bunk beds you can see here. Not exactly very comfortable, but alas, if it gave you security, you were happy to stay here and not be above. You can imagine, you hear the noises in the background kind of to simulate what it would have been like hearing the air raid sirens above. It's quite terrifying and quite eerie. Down here is the rooms of the Prime Minister's toilets. And Mrs. Steenhouse, you have to find out who Miss Steenhouse was. He might have been his private secretary, perhaps. And Brigadier Harvey White. Mr. Bracken, I believe, was he private secretary of Churchill? I think he was, actually. Brendan Bracken. This is his room. Here's an interesting room, the Prime Minister's dining room, albeit very modest, but alas, the most elaborate dining facilities for Churchill. Down here. In fact, he only spent 3 nights down here in total. Favourite 10 Downing Street. And we have Mrs. Churchill's room up here. Clementine, his beloved Clementine's room. Again, rarely spent time down here, but came down during the worst raids. His daughter spent a lot of time down here as well, huh? Mrs. Churchill. So what you're looking at right now is the Chiefs of Staff conference room, and at the back it says in summer 1944 the Chiefs of Staff met in this room to discuss a new threat to Britain. Germany's V-1 flying bombs were killing thousands of people and terrifying British civilians. The chiefs debated how to respond to these attacks. and they'll have a show of that debate between them very shortly, coming up in 1 minute.
Flying bombs have killed or seriously wounded 7,400 people and reduced London's factory output by a quarter. He proposes we publish a list of 100 small German towns and announce our intention to destroy them one by one unless the flying bombs stop. So I don't believe it would work. Flying bombs are the Germans' only means of attacking the morale of this country, so I don't think they will stop.
The Prime Minister is concerned that London and the South East is being badly hit. He wants us to be seen to be striking back at the enemy as hard as we can. And there is a grave risk. These reprisals could lead to the Germans shooting our captured aircrew in retaliation.
Right. Whilst it's clear we're not entirely in agreement, I do believe we have reached a consensus. I therefore propose that we tell Prime Minister 1, we do not feel that attacks on small German towns should be undertaken at this time, but 2, the time might come when an all-out attack on German civilians in this way could achieve significant results.
The flying bomb attacks continued for 9 more months until March 1945. When the Allied armies in northwest Europe finally advanced far enough to stop them.
So this is Mrs. Landomer's kitchen, private cook, whose life he saved in Downing Street. So not only did Churchill stay down here, but he preferred number 10, but also the number 10 annex, and that was behind the door here on the right. Was a staircase that led up to a ground floor suite of rooms for Churchill. So he spent most of his time, it was guarded by this Royal Marine. This would have been his bedroom in the number 10 annex. And this would have been his living room in the annex. Nice. Now this is very interesting. This is actually the red dots seen on the map here represent the damage the V1 rockets did in London. So if you look closely here, you'll see we're here at the Churchill War Rooms, so see how closely these bombs dropped in the area. And of course there's Downing Street, kitchens of Downing Street. It's incredible to think how closely these bombs actually blew up in this immediate area. It's amazing. So if you are enjoying the tour so far, go ahead and click that like and share button and help others discover this video. And for more virtual tours of London and beyond, consider subscribing to our channel. Be sure to visit our website to learn more about our in-person tours and London travel tips. We also offer live and virtual tours in cities throughout the world. You can help support this channel by donating through the thanks button or by buying your tour guide a pint or a cup of coffee. Links to do so are in the description below. Now back to the tour. Fascinating.
Downstairs, I think it's fair to say, where the Marines were. And somehow, because of this dread of the Marines, we all felt quite safe.
I'm terribly sorry about the audio. I can't shout. Now, this is fascinating. So, Churchill made 4 radio addresses to the nation from the war rooms here, and this was the BBC Broadcasting Centre, from which those addresses which were made in his own private bedroom. But of course, the signal came through here. This is modelled on the old-style BBC radio broadcasting equipment that would have been here in 1940, 1941. All those broadcasts he made were streamed through this BBC operating room here. And here is the switchboard room, which would have been manned 24/7 by one of these switchboard girl operators. Most of the phones down here were secret lines. There were scramble phones and secure lines that were directed to all the major offices of the Army, the Navy and the Royal Air Force. But there was also a direct line to the Pentagon from here that Churchill used to speak to Franklin D. Roosevelt and later Harry S. Truman. So we're going to speak a bit about that in a very top secret room that nobody even knew about. And we'll be approaching that very shortly. This is the typist room. Now all women were required to be in here, and as most of the rooms were off limits to the women at the time. But their job was no less important. They were probably privy to some information, top secret information, before anyone in the world was, typing all the orders and commands coming from the War Council room and being sent all over the world to British soldiers and army officers. Terrible responsibility, a terrifying responsibility, being updated on the day-to-day crisis of the war and being sworn to secrecy. Any secrets that were revealed from working down here were punishable by 2 years in prison and hard labour. The advanced headquarters of the General Headquarters of Home Forces. So I just want to read out this information to you as a bit of background before we head in there. Located deep within the Cabinet War Rooms, the map room processed information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Its maps and briefing documents provided an accurate picture of what was happening around the world. The map room received intelligence from the Army, Navy, Air Force, Home Secretary and other official sources. Staff constantly updated details on the relevant maps. Every morning they wrote a record summarising the war situation for the King, Prime Minister, Chiefs of Staff, their planning staff and the War Cabinet. The map room was the beating heart of Britain's war effort. So effectively, this is where all the information on a daily basis was coming through, whether through telegram, through letter, through phone call, a constant stream of information coming through and being reported through this room. 4 men were given the tremendously difficult task of processing all this information and delivering a report every morning to the Chiefs of Staff, Prime Minister Winston Churchill and King George VI. It had to be ready by 9 a.m. Not only were these gentlemen processing this information, they too were also being the first amount of people to realise how many casualties were taking place on a day-to-day basis. These are some of the maps with the original pinpoints and the markers still on them, ladies and gentlemen, preserved and intact, and a massive conservation project on behalf of IWM, because this area effectively lay idle for up to 40 years, and the majority of these incredible maps were in danger of being destroyed by dust and decay, and all the utensils that were being used in here. So a massive project came up to preserve all this valuable documents and files from the map room. Thankfully they did, because it gives us all an opportunity to go through everything here in detail. One of the most significant rooms and the most important rooms, the nucleus, the beating heart of the Cabinet War Rooms, coming up, the map room. Every day the progress of the war was reported in every minute detail through here. Came through here what we call the beauty phones. You see these roll phones on and they rang by flashing the lights because of the constant stream of noise and phone call coming in. These were scramble phones, and they were very secure lines, and they would have related directly to all different parts of the world, but all different members of the armed forces. Now, 4 people would man here 24 hours a day. I mean, this job was insanely important to the war effort. Churchill regularly stormed in and out of here, demanding information, checking out the maps. Now, it's going to be quite difficult to see, but a lot of these maps had tiny pinprints on them, and they were to track the progress of the convoys. Now, obviously, Britain was very dependent on, as a seafaring nation, on these transatlantic convoys, but of course, it's where the battle that rage between the U-boat war, which kept Churchill awake at night. But these carried vital materials, raw materials, food, weapons, supplies, which would win or lose the war. And it's very difficult to see the detail, but there's so many pinpricks. And that, some of them obviously have been taken out because of the casualties that would take place during that tremendous war that's being ravished against them. Now, no women were ever allowed in this room. It's just amazing to think the responsibility that were on these men's shoulders. Again, frozen in time, this room is exactly as it was when they literally just got up and left in 1945, the end of the World War, after the surrender of Japan and of course when the bomb was dropped in Nagasaki. And again, all the clocks here frozen in time at 2 minutes to 5. So let's have a quick look over here. Do not touch, chance would be a fine thing. And these are just an example of some of those little pinpricks you see here and the detail that was on them. Churchill regularly stormed in here, as you can imagine, in a very tense environment in this very room every day, particularly in 1940 when a German invasion seemed imminent. And of course we're talking about rationing here in World War II as well, so everything was rationed, even to the point where one of these chaps, when they opened the drawer, they found 4 cubes of sugar he'd been keeping in the drawer. He was chafing the sugar into his tea, and they were still intact. I mean, it's incredible. And that ledger there had to be signed in and signed out if anyone was taking any document of any importance from here. Even the king himself would have to sign out of that ledger. This, ladies and gentlemen, was Churchill's bedroom. He only ever spent 3 nights in this bedroom. And of course, again, here's his map, which you can see has 2 curtains over the front. So if anyone came into his room and he didn't want to see any of the military strategies or planning that was taking place on this map, he would close the curtains immediately. He did make 4 radio addresses on this very table here, in the BBC casting room. And this is his chamber pod underneath. He used to call that the Gazunder, because it goes under the bed. Or have his very famous broadcasts through the broadcasting room here in the building were made right here at this very desk. Now you guys, the most important room in the building, which I find absolutely fascinating, which has an engaged sign. This is the most top secret room in the building. This was Winston Churchill's toilet. Why is that top secret? So this, in fact, had not been his toilet, even though, contrary to popular belief, everyone believed it had. This was one of the most, again, secure rooms in the building. It had been a broom closet that had been converted for him, so he needed somewhere he could speak securely to the US President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The interesting thing about this here is the telephone in this room was connected to the Sig Sally Scramble, and that was located in a sub-basement of Selvage's department, because it was almost 6-7 feet wide and there was no room for it down here. It filled a room the size of this lobby. So fascinating, ladies and gentlemen. Churchill's toilet, aka secret conversation room with the US President, and this was his engaged sign. How remarkable. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our tour today of the Cabinet War Rooms. Thank you as ever for joining me. Sinead standing out here for Free Tours by Foot London, heading back to that incredible gift shop to buy myself some goodies. Thanks for joining me. See you all very soon.